So we'll do a plenary with Sergio Lazzarini, and Sandro will also chime in. And so we have a great pleasure to have Sergio speaking for us. Sergio, go ahead.
Hello, thanks. Thanks, Sandro and Leandro, everybody, for the opportunity to be here. Great to see your faces here, several friends. Fantastic to be here. So the topic of this panel is challenges of producing high quality and impactful research. What I thought, actually, I had a conversation with with the organizers. Basically, the idea here would be to discuss a bit. I mean, I have some experience of producing or trying to publish and doing research in an emerging market, right? I mean, since I graduated, I have been I've been associated with Insper, and therefore, from the point of view of a scholar located in emerging markets, what are the kind of the challenges, right, that we would face? And actually, we'll talk about the challenges of a scholar. Also, João is Brazilian, but he's working in schools in established in developed countries, right? So anyway, so hope that it'll be useful even with my presentation only, but it's great that Sandro also collaborate here. So I'm going to share my presentation now. So I've been doing this, making this presentation on several occasions, but the idea is then, as I mentioned, to discuss those challenges, especially when we in our countries we have particular problems that can, I mean, addressing those problems can generate a lot of impact. Sometimes they may or may not be well received in academia, in the traditional academia, say in top journals, international top journals. And actually, I use a kind of a short case of an article that I had the pleasure to collaborate with Sandro. Sandro invited me. He had this very nice database of police officers, investigations of police officers in an internal affair division of a police organization. So we decided to write this paper on this, it's called the Guardian's problem, and basically theoretically we're framing this as a kind of an agency problem, right? The traditional agency model, you have a principal, and then you have an agent, and then principal have incentives to monitor the agents because the principal is different from the agent, right? I mean, say the shareholder wants the company to...
Just a minute. Are you using the slides because it seems to me it's frozen?
Holder will monitor managers, and the shareholder will have incentives to monitor the agents, right? Guess what? In public bureaucracies, who are the monitors? The agents, right? Police officers will be allocated to those internal affairs division to be the monitors of agents. And this creates a big problem. It's the Guardian's problem, very old problem discussed by Plato, actually, in the Republic. And Sandro and I decided to write this paper and frame that as this theoretical question. We think it is pretty relevant, right? I mean, for countries, for police organizations, I mean, public policies, etc. And also, we think it's a novel kind of issue in organizational research. We thought, at least. What happened is that we submitted to a top journal in 2010. It was we received a desk rejection. Actually, the letter was nice in a sense that the editor said. I mean, there's some positive comments on our paper, but the paper is too narrow. This is a nice paper, interesting read, well done analysis. But the editor said the nature of police corruption investigation in Brazil may be widely different from than in other places such as major U.S. cities. The paper itself is in good shape, and I have only a few comments. So essentially, that person is not criticizing essential things in the paper. This person is simply saying that the paper is not relevant or something, or it's kind of a curiosity for the Brazilian concept. And then we draw kind of widely different. I mean, there's this famous movie and book called Serpico, Al Pacino, really classic movie. It's about police corruption in New York, describing exactly the same problems that we're finding in the database, right? So I don't know if you want to watch this movie. It's highly recommended. So and even actually in the paper we added some quotes saying that I don't know, in the United States you have those problems, little inconsistency, consistency in the punishment that is done. Also, we report cases in Australia, Canada, and developed world, right? I mean, not only in emerging markets. And also, we had this quote in the paper: "Is a problem found in all countries, etc., etc., etc." And still, it was not considered something that was interesting or relevant. And therefore, I mean, what we have here is that I'd like to talk to you is that sometimes you have this problem, which is in our day-by-day lives in an emerging market or a non-traditional country, let's say, I mean, non-traditional from the point of view of top scholars in developed countries. Sometimes we are focusing on things that will be kind of different and strange, right? And we always have this kind of tension between local versus general topics, research topics, databases, demands. There are several difficulties associated with the language. Even if a person knows English, that doesn't mean that the person will be able to write in academic English and the expected structure of a text that is framed and targeted to top journals. There are several trade-offs because my advisor, my dissertation advisor was Todd Zenger, and I was talking to Todd one day, and Todd was saying, I mean, you guys in emerging markets, you get all the time this kind of demand to do consulting, and you can have this big impact. This is nice. Here in the United States, we are so many. There are so many of us that we don't have that kind of a leverage in the real world, right? So in a sense, it's good in a sense that people keep asking us about, how can we solve this problem at the police organization? How can we design this better regulatory agency? Help improve the operations of my company, right? But I mean, we also need to reconcile that with research demands, and also sometimes in those non-traditional areas where we are out of the social cliques. I think that more and more that this is crucially important, right? I mean, if you're not part of a social clique of scholars doing certain types of research, you don't actually know what will be the next steps. You know what are the papers that are going to be published in journals or were published in journals or being discussed in conferences, but we don't know where the ball is moving, right? We need to know where the ball is moving in the field, basically. And you need to be part of those conversations otherwise. Some years ago, I wrote a paper actually trying to describe those local versus local demands versus those more general demands of publishing top journals. So imagine here in the horizontal axis, you have the scope of your theory of whether you are doing refinements applicable to your own country, say, or whether this is broad theory applicable to many countries, and whether your empirical setting, data, cases, etc., is local or general, right? So, suppose I guess all of you know this kind of VRIO framework, right? Jay Barney. Resource-based. Suppose we would like to test this framework VRIO, that resources are valuable, rare, difficult to imitate and exploit by the organization using local data. So basically, you're using local data from Brazil to promote a general test of a VRIO framework proposed by Barney. So you send this paper to Barney. Hey, Barney. Hey, Jay Barney. We tested your framework using data from Brazil, right? You can also say, no, I'm going to test this using general data, or say data from the US, or traditional data. And then you send this paper to Jay and you say, hey, Jay, here's a test of VRIO with American US data, right? Here, you are not testing the VRIO model in general, right? But we are promoting some local refinements. So we're saying, basically, how can I apply this VRIO model to the context of my country? For instance, I can argue that countries, emerging markets, have a stronger influence of a corruption, political process, etc. And therefore, I may discuss how certain firms or groups may develop capabilities to connect with the political sector, and those capabilities can be valuable, rare, difficult to imitate, or something. Right? It's a local refinement, and I can use Brazilian data, say, or data from Colombia, or data from South Korea, whatever. And in general, in this general approach, I test how VRIO actually can be examined using data from several countries, right? So there's several distinct approaches that you can have in your theory. So what I argue is that, I mean, if you are in an emerging country and try to test a general theory of general data from the United States, I mean, you're going to have limited competitive advantage, because other scholars probably are doing that. They have better access to that kind of data. You can try to do it, but anyway, it'll be hard. If you try to test the VRIO model general with Brazilian data, you're going to have limited global contribution. Folks who ask you, okay, is this applicable to Brazil, to Brazilian context? How about other countries, right? I mean, local refinements, I mean, to increase this kind of impact is possibly the way to go. But what you need to do is actually try to find a problem that perhaps is applicable to a particular country, but can also be faced by other countries as well. In my paper with Sandro, we perhaps could have invested more in this part, right? Showing that, okay, this is local data. It talks about discarding the guardian's problem. It could be applicable to other countries. And you have a home run, or in football, soccer, you can say Goldie Black or something along those lines. Not standing goal. If you actually get a local phenomenon, analyze a local phenomenon, local data, and try to show that, and then increase the number of expand your database and so on. So I actually did that more recently in my career. In the beginning of my career, one of my papers of my dissertation was a general theory using data from several countries here in the airline industry. I was analyzing alliances, etc. But then I was, being in Brazil, I was kind of seeing, there are several issues here that are not being studied a lot, including, for instance, the presence of the state in economy, the presence of the state in companies, actually. So then I decided to collect some local data on that, how the state, how the government participates in the ownership of companies, and therefore partnered with Valdo Musacchio, friend, and then we later on we expanded that and expanded our database to several other countries. So this could be a way to, for instance, not the unique way, but a way to increase or to reconcile the issue of impact and local in your local conditions, and also impact in academia in general. An early example of a work that did just that and was hugely influential was this book by Hernando de Soto, The Other Path, where Hernando de Soto showed the number of bureaucratic procedures to set up a company in Peru. I mean, you can see here the form, the length of the form, the number of bureaucratic procedures, and this became really influential and even, created a new area with on transaction costs, bureaucracy, transaction costs to set up new companies, etc. Several scholars in established companies like Charun Khanna, Krishna Palep, also more recently, we're talking about strategy in emerging markets, right? But those guys are located in developed countries, so perhaps scholars in emerging markets could also have initiated this kind of line of research. Right, I mean, along those lines of starting with a local problem and try to generalize that local problem. So what to do given those conflicts? Actually argue that this is a problem that should be faced, should be actually observed by both scholars working in traditional countries and scholars working in more emerging areas. Scholars from traditional countries need to be open to new ideas and phenomena. A local paper can bring important lessons, right? And actually, even though we had those problems before, like Sandro and I mean, submitting papers dealing with those local issues and problems and dilemmas involving public-private interactions. Actually, from that year, 2010, and now there has been a new interest in those things. There's a group of established scholars interested in that, welcoming that. One of such scholars is our friend, Anita Magan. For instance, Anita was instrumental in the early years of Sandro and I were depressed with this, and Anita welcomed us, said, guys, those problems are important. Go ahead, invest in that. So Jay Barney is now hugely, promoting those. I mean, now we have a better, I think, a better environment to do that. Even though we still face problems, Sandro and I. So Sandro, sorry to mention you so much, but you are my friend and co-author. I mean, it's inevitable, but we do so many papers together. So Sandro and I actually have a recent paper on social impact bonds. A social impact bond is a contract between a government and an investor, where the investor funds certain types of public operations and receives payments based on performance. It's an incentive contract, right? And we submitted that to a journal editor. It was not a formal submission. We just sent a message to the editor of the journal for an early feedback on whether that paper would fit the journal. It's a top journal in strategy. And the editor said, this is not strategy, because this is a problem faced by policymakers, government policymakers, not managers. And then what? I mean, aren't government policymakers managers? Those guys designing those social impact bonds, those are managers with they really face those problems. They need to deal with those problems, right? So anyway, even though it's better, we still find some pushback, right? Anyway, also I think that those scholars from traditional countries should also avoid this over-embeddedness of those social cliques. They should welcome other scholars. There are some enlightened scholars who do that, Anita and others, for instance, but we need more, definitely. Develop collaborative projects with scholars from non-traditional countries, accept invitations to participate in workshops, conferences, etc. In the pre-COVID period, we'll travel, but now, so perhaps there's an opportunity to participate online, develop foreign workshops, etc. I think that this initiative here is one such example. Now, scholars from non-traditional countries, which is my case, for instance, I don't see that there is any point personally in doing research on things that are not passionate just for the sake of publications, to be frank. I mean, I cannot do that personally, so do what you like, actually, but try to find new issues that can speak to problems, more general problems, right? Connect with those key scholars to learn and understand topics, partner with experienced scholars, and my own experience, for instance, it's good to partner, especially with folks on tenure track, right? Because they really want to work hard and generate papers, generate publications. Language, this needs practice, as I mentioned before. English in general is not academic English. There's a way to write papers. There's a way to write sentences. There's a standard to understand that and to facilitate this kind of communication. This takes time, and there are existing kind of management resources or strategic management society resources, different strategy that can help you, PDWs, consortium, etc., etc. So, and don't give up. It's a tough process. It's hard. Takes time. Takes years, but it's very important and necessary. So, thank you.
Thank you, Sergio. Now I'll head to Sandro. Sandro, go ahead.
Well, thank you. For the audience, sorry, but actually what happened, we learned yesterday in the night that João couldn't join us. And we have some options. The option is leaving Sergio alone. The second option is inviting someone else, and the third one, some of us organized to step in. So leaving Sergio alone, so say, well, Sergio is nice, but let's try to establish a conversation. Inviting someone the last minute, I thought inviting Olivier, but he could curse me to the last minute invitation. I said probably he would not like to receive a last minute invitation. Say I volunteer myself in the group, so I can go there. Well, at least I can tell some jokes and entertain people with some. But just
well, I mean, if you want, I can at least share also one anecdote with you. I mean, it was not about Brazilian firms; it was about Russian firms. And I think somehow it's even worse, because I think that more naturally people like more, I mean, at least in the past, because, well, at least in the past, people like more Brazil than Russia, or know more about Brazil than about Russia. Or believe to know more about Brazil than about Russia. So still, anyway, I was signing a paper that was about merger and acquisition in Russia. Okay, so there was not really an IB dimension. That's the truth. It was more about domestic deals, and I submitted it to SMJ. And well, of course, there was a number of weaknesses, so I'm not criticizing the decision that was made. But one of the reviewers said, "Is not a topic in strategy." Okay. Then we decided after some revision of the paper to send it to GIPS. And of course, GIPS said it's not an IDB paper, because of course there was no IB dimension in the paper. Well, so this was a risk this is a risk you could be taking, but I agree with Sergio that I think things have been changing. And hopefully, I think today reviewers are more open-minded. And as a joke, I mean, at least in the IB community, for a long time, I think that I think it was the Academy of Management, or AMJ, that was defining everything that was not US like IB. Okay, and so let's say differently, that there was little understanding even by academics about what means working on emerging countries, or what means working on IB topics. But again, my feeling is things are changing, and well, I mean, if you explain well the context, it's also an advantage you have, because you can contextualize also your theory, and so you can also maybe build mechanisms that are quite unique. And again, I mean, you need a bit of luck, okay? I'm sorry to say this. I mean, you need a great paper, but you need also a bit of luck. And if you are not lucky, you don't get the right reviewer. And well, but again, if you have a good paper, you will be publishing it somewhere, and you will be publishing it in a good journal. Okay, if it's really a good paper. So yes, there is a bit of randomness, but it's not explaining. I don't think it's explaining whether or not you will be able to publish it well. I mean,
you.
It will more likely explain where you will be publishing it, that is the fact that you will be managing to publish it, to make it clear.
Thank you, Olivier. Thank you so much. It is nice to.
And again, I mean, I've been realizing for Russia, like for Brazil, that there is a lot of nice data. So for people who are more data-driven or phenomenon-driven, and well, exploiting them can also give you an advantage, because very few people have been using or exploiting them before. So you can think it differently. Okay, as usual, you say transforming your weaknesses into strengths. You can do it in research as well. I mean.
So thank you, Olivier. Let me offer a different perspective here, because both Olivier and Sergio are great scholars, terrific scholars. And Sergio, he hates it when every time I tell this. Sergio is the best management scholar in Brazil, but the best. Don't tell me who is the second, because I don't know. The guy is the best, and I'm glad to work with him. I'm so glad that he's able here to share with us his trajectory here. But I'll tell here a story from a different perspective that fits with the most part of the audience. I'm not trained abroad. Olivier had a good training in Paris, in an econ training. I know the spot that Olivier was trained. And Sergio was trained with one of the great scholars in the US, was Todd Zenger. I was trained here in Brazil. And most part, I was trained in Bahia. That's not, I'm not depressing myself, but just to figure out that, well, the trend here, the standard here in Brazil is having scholars that are trained, locally trained. And we all know the deficiencies that we have in the training in the graduate programs, especially in the doctoral programs. We have the training to produce clones of ourselves, not to reproduce ourselves in our students. That's the trend. That's the trend. And well, the problem is the Brazilian system has, well, evolved a lot, but it's plain, well, it's packed of incentive problems. We have a very strong incentive problems in Brazilian academia. And graduate students suffer the consequence of the incentives problem. The incentives problem in terms of producing outputs instead of outcomes. A bunch of papers, because this bunch of papers grant access to funding, to travel, to prestige in the local forums, and lots of people in Brazil follow this trend. And as scholars, they reproduce this kind of behavior in their students. And guys, it's depressing to see every time when I see the list of the rank of researchers, the productivity researchers, in which you have the CNPq level 2 and level 1. And I don't see Sergio in the level 1. This guy's amazing, man. This guy has MJ, AMR, SMJ, Org Science, the whole list. He could be everywhere in the world, in the top 10 schools, and this guy's not a top scholar. And when you see the list, you say, well, there's something wrong here. There's something wrong. And forums like this is just about to say, look, well, if you want to impact the real impact, that's the way. It's tough, as Sergio said, it's tough. But every single time when I'm invited to speak, I say to people, so well, guy, oh, it's tough, but I'm from Bahia. If I made it, you can make it. Believe me, man. The bar is not that high. I could jump the bar. I could jump. And this is not a, it's just about to do how to do this. Well, but information is available. Information is available. If you don't have a good training in your local school, try finding connections. The online world facilitates a lot the connections. When I did my PhD, well, my PhD was in 2006, December 2006, almost 15 years as PhD. It was hard. It's not that easy to obtain papers. Today, you send a message to the author and just send me the paper, the guy in 1 minute, 2 minutes, because the guy has the interest to make their papers cited. It's not that difficult. If your university doesn't have the data, the papers repository, you can ask those papers. The methods, we have an online course and we have connections. And as Sergio mentioned, is about practicing. I mean, reading, writing. And you're gonna make mistakes. Of course, you're gonna make mistakes. Nobody knows. None of us, well, the vast majority of us, I mean, was not English speakers from the very beginning. No, this is why we have those accents, these funny accents when I speak, but it's fine. It's pretty much fine. And it is a matter of language. It's a matter of language. And also it's a matter of curiosity. You must be curious about something. As the paper about the cooperative in Pará, Sergio's paper, Sergio Gomes' paper, he has a curiosity of understanding that local context. And that context is great. Sergio Lazzarini and Leandro Pongelupi and Dirk, hey, they have a paper. The challenge is about how to make this, to pack this story, to make this story interesting. That's the challenge. How to make this story interesting for a broader audience. It takes time. It requires some training. But believe me, it's a lot of hard work. It's a lot of hard work. But you have something, sometimes is much more art than science. And how to tell a story, how to tell, how to frame, how to convince people, how to connect with the people. And of course, interpersonal skills matter. Telling jokes or drinking beers, believe me, sometimes matter and help. Doesn't mean that everybody need to follow, but this facilitates a lot of interaction, because at the end of the day, the academia is a club. Right? You find people that are more like you, and these social norms matter. And going to conference is key. Going to conference is key. I know it's hard to get funding. No, I know this. I know it's not easy. This is why we must be selective. And this is why space like this, to create a mass, that's what we need. We need a mass. We need a mass of people that we present a paper, and this mass recognize this paper. This mass is able to understand what the comments that brilliant comments Rodrigo made to Ricardo's paper. We don't have this mass, and our challenge here is creating this mass of strategy scholars in Brazil. This is why, well, we are organizing this workshop. And this is why the idea is first year, do this workshop in Brazil. And then next year, we hope we can join force with other South American scholars, because we turn our backs to our South American colleagues, which is a bad thing to do, because we have lots of things to do with Argentina scholars. There are lots of Argentinians publishing SMJ in Chile, Peru, Colombia. So we need to create a mass. We need to create a mass. But the mass for high quality papers, toward high quality papers. And I don't speak about myself, about the papers, because it was, well, it's boring stuff. It's boring stuff. The only thing that I advise you is be passionate. If you don't like what you do, find another profession. Find another profession. It's a tough profession. We have no weekends. We have no holidays. I don't remember the last time when I have a 1 week vacation without opening emails and correspond to my quote. I don't remember. And I don't recommend that for anybody. But that's the profession that I choose. I like that. And when I'm writing a paper, and we'll have some co-authors here, they know how we work. 2 a.m. I'm working, sending messages, exchanging email. Well, when I sleep, I said, wow, I could do this for free. And people pay me for that, because I like it. If you don't like what you do, man, find another profession. But if you're passionate, you're curious about things, you are the right profession. And try to do something that's meaningful. I mean, something that moves the science, something that helps people to improve their lives. That's what we're here for. So thanks so much for hearing me and my testimony. I think we have some questions.
Yeah, we have a couple of questions. So Ricardo, go ahead.
Thank you. I hope there's no noise, but I think, well, first of all, thank you. the insights were very, very inspiring, and the anecdotes and the personal experience also motivating. My question is probably more going a little bit deeper and inviting everybody to put their research hats to understand why the community of editors basically have this bias, right? So it's like, if we were actually able to understand as basically scholars what are basically the underlying reasons why basically there's some bias against probably research that I would say comes from the tropics, right? Let's say Brazil or Colombia or South Africa or Malaysia. So I mean, and that's basically the general question. And my motivating anecdote, or just basically what I feel, is like when, for instance, I started looking at papers in strategy and international business. In particular, international business, what's the area I'm trying to just dive in or be recognized in the near future. Basically, what I observe is that whenever you are not talking to a multinational key decision maker, you are actually out of the scope. Out of this is like, and my very first, I'm coming from the US and I've been interacting with business schools in the United States. What I feel is like, whenever you're talking about international business, basically you need to think it through basically the main employer for MBA students in the US, which are multinationals, right? So, and there probably is an hypothesis which is market driven, right? And if that's true, probably what I need to do, and that's basically the consequences, but I need to basically rephrase and reframe probably my research and my questions that are probably very interesting for me, but also probably more relevant for these type of key stakeholders that are actually motivating the editor's decisions in publications. That would be probably my broad question, my applied question. But yeah, my invitation is basically to understand what is basically behind this, behind the framework that Sergio Lazzarini presented. Thank you very much.
Can I answer that or provide some comments? Because
yeah, of course.
Because yesterday, I mean, I had an interaction. I'm here at the University of Toronto, right? I'm visiting University of Toronto. I'm in Canada now, and I had yesterday a conversation with Will Mitchell. We all know Will Mitchell, right? I mean, I had an opportunity to talk to him yesterday, and Will Mitchell was my editor twice at SMJ. And first thing I said to Will was, Will, thank you so much. I never had an opportunity to thank you for your help. You clearly believed in my papers and you wanted to move that forward. And especially my last one, which is called Strategizing by the Government. It's pretty odd topic for SMJ, right? Pretty, you know, I mean, depending on the editor, I mean, the editor would say, I mean, this is not about firms or, you know, and I thanked Will, and Will said, you know, what Will said was, you know, sometimes we as editors would like the safe kind of type of papers that, you know, over this well-established literature, add a tweak or an interaction or something, and they claim that they have a big contribution. Will told me, but those papers are really boring. I don't like those. I like papers that take risks. So your paper was one of those cases. Now, Will is not the rule, unfortunately. It's the exception, in my opinion, right? Several editors that have those clicks, they want papers to fit their established, you know, clicks. They send the paper to your paper to reviewers who are from this literature, and they are gatekeepers. They will not like if you're going to challenge this or that. I mean, so anyway, you need an enlightened editor. Now I'm serving as an associate editor of the Global Strategy Journal, and I'm really trying to, you know, be attentive to those things. But I may err. I mean, this is part, Ricardo. This is part of our natural biases, right? But I think that what is really important in this agenda is what Will said. I mean, they need to take risks because innovations, by definition, will be something uncertain, right? I mean, anyway.
Thank you, Sergio. I don't know if anyone else has any comment on Ricardo's question. If you have a reply, Ricardo. Okay, so then I'll pass the floor to Angélica. Angélica, please go ahead, ask your question. If you want to ask in Portuguese or in English, whatever you prefer.
I will ask in English. My question for the professors is related to strategic aspects for Brazil in terms of publication, because I've been heard in many seminars, congress, workshops, things about language, bias, different contexts, different culture between researchers and reviewers. My question is, what do you think about the best strategic way for Brazil and for Latin America countries to enhance the level of local periodics, local journals? Because today in Brazil, we don't have big journals in the level of A1. We have good journals, but we don't have a movement or maybe effort towards towards this enhancement. I mean, how we can do it to reach out the same level of international countries? I know that English is the global language. I think that we have to know and speaking and reading and writing correctly, but we have a huge population that don't speak English. We have many scholars that don't speak English. What do you think that would be the best strategy for us, especially in Brazil?
Well, let me ask that. I was editor for some years of an A2 journal, Organização e Sociedade, OES, and now I'm associate editor of HAP, Brazilian Review of Public Administration, which is another A2. So having said that, I have a quite experience in editing journals, and I do think that is a matter of having critical mass. What I mean by critical mass, you can try to raise the bar. You can try to raise the bar during your term as an editor and improve the quality of what's published here. However, we don't have enough set of qualified reviewers that we have. Good reviewers are tough. And this is why when I was at the OES, I was running with my colleague Ariadne and Rigo, we're very restricted in terms of desk rejection, because the most valuable asset that we have is reviewers. As an editor, of course, we must have good papers, but the reviewers, and I need to protect the reviewers. How I can protect the reviewers? Send them just good stuff. But however, this takes time from the editor. The editor needs to read the paper. The editor needs to read the reviewers and not outsource. I'm so sorry. Several editors, not only in Brazil, but even abroad, they outsource their works with reviewers. They simply outsource. They are mere dispatchers. But they don't have any critical, or sometimes they are biased. Sometimes we have editors that don't have a clue about what's going on in the literature. They have their own biases. And the problem is we don't have a critical mass. So first we have critical mass, and we must have people that donate their times to do this. I donate my time, and believe me, I collect lots of enemies, lots of enemies, because you reject papers. And I don't mean I was right. I was doing something that I was thinking that was right, but raising the bar requires efforts, and you don't must to do a perspective. Should we need more journals? I don't think we should need more. We should need less journals. And we have a bunch of journals in this country, and a bunch of low quality journals. And even the high quality journals, if you see those papers, they have lots of problems. But you have the internal system that is fed by those local publications, because as I said, dozens of publications in local journals grant access to grants, to funding. And you know that it's a system that internal feeds itself. And it's hard, but I don't see how to change this game without a critical mass. And critical mass is like this: creating qualified students, students that are not output driven but outcome driven, and that's the only way I see we can change this game. I don't know if Sergio or others have a different perspective about this.
Just would like to add something. One thing that really helped me a lot in this pandemic period was to participate in a bunch of workshops. This year alone, I believe I've been in 4 or 5 different PDWs presenting papers of mine. And it has really helped me to glimpse how to write papers, how to frame arguments, how to build my empirical portion of the paper. So I believe we are making some advance here. Just for example, we are having a PDW today. And I think that if we were able to intensify those efforts, I mean, in AMPAD, in SEMEAD, also promoting 1 or 2 days with professional development workshops for Brazilian academics, it would be very beneficial, and it would help a lot of young researchers to improve their skills on writing papers, and it would also help them to better understand what's going on outside Brazil, what's going on in Brazil, and make better decisions on how to write their papers and where to send those papers.
And along these lines that Thiago is mentioning, this year we have the initiative at AMPAD of PDWs. Alqueta asked me to organize this. A lot of work, believe me, for 3 days. One doctor or a doctor consortium, and 2 days of lots of tables with several stuff. Takes time. And we need more senior. I'm putting myself in the senior category. It's hard to admit that. But that's the point. It takes time, and even for the more senior or more experienced people, and we need to have more people trying to build the academia. And of course, you'll not be the most popular guy, because you make choices, and when you decide to make a choice about, let's say, quantitative methods, you made some choice, or about the kind of approach, or when you go to qualitative, people say, oh, this is a mainstream perspective, blah blah. They make choice. But these kind of initiatives are essential to move our field forward in order to create a stronger community, not only strategy but also in other areas in the management domain.
Great. Does anyone has any comments, questions? Because otherwise, I think we'll be.
Well, just to add, I mean, on top of what was said, I mean, in France, typically we don't have any good journal in management as well. I don't think that you find any good or serious journal in management in Italy as well, or in Spain. So, well, I don't think this problem is specific to Brazil, and typically because a lot was said about critical mass. I mean, typically in France, even in France, I mean, with top institutions like INSEAD, HEC, and so on, well, I remember it was hard for me to when I was in Paris, to build a regular workshop in strategy as well. Okay, there are not so many scholars with a high quality of publication, even in the individual European countries. So I don't think this problem is specific to Brazil. Of course, probably the problem is more accurate, but it's not specific.
Yeah, great point. Great point. So if anyone else, if no one else has any comments, I think we're gonna finish the session now, and then we're gonna